Well, good morning to all, and this is a glorious, glorious Friday morning. And myself and Pat McGart are going to do our very best to destroy it for you. And right, have I got that right, Pat?
Yeah, absolutely.
We're going
Yeah.
to we're going to deal with really, really boring topics, but you'll just have to put up with them because we can't think of any better. Okay, okay. Go to
Yes.
another channel if you don't like us.
Go
Okay.
somewhere else.
First one, and you can get in for free. First one we want to do is, of course, that much loved, I was going to say institution, but
Yeah.
what would you call it? A gathering together of talent from all over
Yeah.
Europe and Israel, the Eurovision Song Contest. What are your, first of all, Pat, what are your natural instinctive reactions when somebody says to you, Eurovision Song Contest? Do you think of Dana?
Uh, Something like that, Jude. But I was watching a wee bits and snippets on the news and so on. Jude, I think it's become a joke. Remember, the Father Ted. Ireland had won it so often. I think Ireland was won it 7 times. That
Yeah.
remember the RT were so like it was costing them an arm and a leg,
Mm.
and they didn't want it. So I remember the Father Ted did the sort of skit where the entry was "My Lovely Horse." It was so bad, you know, that the whole intention was to make Ireland fail to win it.
Yeah.
Jude, I think the irony has gone. I think it's now the truth. Jude, some of the crap, and I mean, there's no other description. Some of the stuff is absolute rubbish. It's Bambi Thug. Jude, I know some. I thought the Dustin the Turkey was bad, but Jesus, Bambi Thug. Come on.
Well, you see, that's the difference. Well, I think there's two things here, Pat. One is we're of an older generation. Sad to say,
Don't
but
give a
that's what
shit,
we
Jude.
are.
That's nothing to do with it. It's
No, we
rubbish.
don't plug into modern music, to modern pop music.
Yeah.
I'll say that in my part. Maybe you spend your
No,
leisure
I don't.
years going over
Yeah.
really this top 20, but I don't. So I
No.
think that's
Come on, Jude. Look, I'm not. I wasn't the biggest fan of Johnny Logan, but What's Another Year is still a song you could listen to. Remember the boys Charlie McGettigan and I can't
I
remember what
like
guy.
those two guys. Yeah, I like those two guys.
I,
Who you Donegal men, by
I
the way?
the Rock and Roll Kids.
Were
Right,
they rock,
Jude. At one stage,
were they from
they were from
Donegal?
Charlie McGettigan was from Donegal, and
Aye.
the other guy I think might have been a Dubliner. But
Very
anyway,
good.
bottom line, it's Jude. Those and there were most of the songs, but Jesus, Jude. See now, it's like there's a guy. Remember this? We'll get back to Israeli. Remember the guy? I can't remember. Was it Dana? Not our Dana, but the Dana from Israel. He's a
Mark
guy, a
too.
transgender guy wearing a dress with a beard. No, that and I think that what you're going for now is the more outrageous. I think half the time now it's the visual. The song contest is
Oh,
all
it
but
is.
gone. There are people coming out dressed as dinosaurs, and and half the time the women are wearing next to nothing. It's got very little to do with a song contest now.
Aye, well, that's true. I watched. I think it must have been the news or something, and I saw it on.
Mm.
But the I was struck by the fact that the camera was swirling all around, and they had special effects in the background, and sort of kind of like when somebody wins the European Cup, the
Yeah,
Champions League, these spurting
yeah,
fountains of sparks and so on. So it does seem, as I'd agree with you, it's very much the performance rather than
yeah.
the actual
The
song.
song.
But well, let's see what happens. There has to be somebody as a
Anyway,
happy.
Dr. Collins, I'll ask you a question. What's your view on the continuing participation of Israel in the Eurovision Song Contest?
I'm not sure if we haven't talked about this before, but I'll tell you quite straight.
But we
No
can talk
problem.
about it
No
again.
problem. They're not from Europe
Yeah,
and they shouldn't be in it. And that's ridiculous.
yeah,
In fact, oh, yes, well, Ukraine would be in it. But somebody said, I saw somebody online there saying, uh, Ukraine and Israel make it to the finals. Quelle surprise.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I thought that was just about the size of it. The whole thing is
yeah.
almost rigged to get the sort of, what would you call it, politically correct attitude to things. I
Here's another question for you. The Eurovision people have what do you call it? Bambi Thug, apparently. What do you call it? Umram. There's a old, what do you call the old Irish writing? Ogram. She had apparently she had some stuff that sort of basically was pro Palestine, and they told her she couldn't wear it.
Oh,
They've also said that anybody with Palestinian colours will not be allowed to participate and all that sort of stuff. But here, and they said there's no politics. But Jude, last year Eurovision banned Russia from participating, but they haven't. By the way, Russia is in Europe, but they haven't banned Israel, which is not in Europe.
that's summed it up, isn't it? Ban the ones that you don't like and are qualified to be participating, and honor Israel by being. I don't know. Why didn't we stop that at the very beginning? When did they first start? When did Israel first start performing in the?
Israel has been participating for many years. But that's the whole thing. I heard people saying, on social media, particularly, why aren't you complaining about what's happening in Yemen? Why aren't you complaining about what's happening in Syria? What are you, all this sort of stuff? But the point is, Jude, these are not in our orbit, and we are not. They're not our allies. Israel is our ally, the West's ally. It's backed by France. It's backed by Germany. It's backed by the UK. It's backed by America. We're not asked to support what's going on in Yemen. We're not asked to support what the Syrians are doing, but we are asked to support what the Israelis are doing, because they're part of our. And Jude, why is Israel allowed to participate in the European Soccer League? Why is it allowed to in the Eurovision Song Contest? Jude, I don't want Israel. What Israel is doing now is barbaric, and I don't want to be not in my name. That's what I'm trying to say.
Actually, I would have been in favor of banning them about 10 years ago at least, because as you and I discussed before October the 7th, regularly Israel was going into Palestine or into Gaza and just shooting people. Some young fella threw a stone at them. They shoot them dead.
Here's a statistic. I looked it up the other day. Between 2008 and October 6th, 2023, Israel shot dead, murdered, whatever you want to call it, 6,400 Palestinians.
That's right. And
they're trying to say that the war started on October 7th.
That's outrageous. That really is outrageous. I listened to a very good podcast when I was out walking or jogging yesterday by a guy called Ezra Klein. My son put me onto him. He's a Jewish guy, American, lives in Los Angeles, but he's a highly intelligent guy, and he talks to a variety of people. One of the people he talked to was a guy who is an Israeli, and maybe an Israeli journalist, or certainly a fairly important figure there. And even though this guy, Ezra Klein, is very smart, he can spot, all sorts of complications around an issue rather than just say, that's that, and that's that. But the one thing that they didn't deal with was the fact that from the institution, essentially, of Palestine, there have been attacks and homelessness foisted onto the Palestinian people. That was played down. I think that's a crime. You have to set the context. Just as you have to set the context. I mean, if people would say, oh, wasn't the troubles terrible here? And so it was in ways. But you've got to set the context. You've got to set the 50 years of misrule here, and you've got to set the context of the 1916 Rising and what they call the War of Independence, where we were left out in the cold, so to speak. If you don't do that, you're not giving proper setting for the issue you're discussing.
But you look at even at Rafah as we speak, Jude, the Americans said there's no full-scale invasion. A lot of the journals are saying the Israelis are shelling all over the place. They have massed at the border, that they have gone within I think a mile in. Now, Gaza, Rafah is a very small place. So, Jude, what's the definition? And no, the Americans, we will not supply them with 2,000-pound bombs. Jude, we'll supply them with everything else.
Yeah, certain kind of weapon, they said.
Certain weapon. Oh, here, we won't give you 2,000-pound bombs, but we'll give you ones that weigh 1,900.
Yeah, I shouldn't be laughing. I shouldn't be laughing at that. It really is horrible.
Anyway,
that's Joe Biden trying to, stride.
I know, but Joe and Starmer, they're now trying to straddle two horses. Basically, there's an election coming up, and particularly like in the UK, Starmer knows now he might need some key seats and in the Yorkshire areas and so on. And he's now trying to walk back some of the comments he made about Gaza. Biden's the same. Biden's losing the young people, and
Yeah.
that's his natural constituency. And he's losing a lot of the Arab votes and a lot of the black votes.
It's too bad, really, that people allow themselves to be carried on with what is a traditional thing of America. We're going to keep on supplying weaponry to Israel. You'd think of a president and a guy like Joe Biden, experienced guy, and you'd like to think he was an honest guy as compared to Trump, for example, that he would have the cop to say, look, this isn't good. We're feeding these guys weapons. We're all for supporting Israel, and we like Israel and its democracy and all that, but we're not going to give them guns or bombs or rockets or tanks to go and kill essentially defenseless people. Now, the big point that guy, the kid on the young fella from California was making on my podcast was that you have to allow for the fact that Israel feels itself besieged. It's a very insecure place. Now, you may say, oh, they've all those weapons, but they are also, a small state surrounded by neighbors who'd rather.
I don't buy that. I used to listen to that too, and I stopped, and I'll tell you why. It's very simple. Israel is one of the, I think it's the third or fourth largest army in the world. That's a fact. Secondly, this rubbish that some Saudi Arabia is going to invade it or something like that, it's never going to happen, Jude. They're supported totally by the Americans. If Israel's invaded by Iran, which will never happen either, the Americans will be in like a rocket, and Iran doesn't want a war with it. And third or fourth thing, I don't know many things I've said now, they've got nuclear weapons, and the threat of nuclear weapons, if it was a doomsday situation, the Israelis are mad enough to use them, and everybody knows that. So poor little Israel as victim, I don't buy.
No, I'm not saying the victims. I'm saying they are have a sense of being besieged. Now, they're well capable of resisting that sort of siege. It's like being in a neighborhood where everybody around you bloody well hates you. And really, if they had their druthers, they would see you annihilated. But they can't do that. But you see, it's hard to have that. And they know they're wrong in what they do when they go out and kill, random Palestinians. And they certainly must know they're wrong in what they're doing now. And yet they can't think themselves out of that. They can't. Again, this podcast is making the point. What they've got to do is try to come to terms with the fact that they're one state. There are lots of other states quite different from them, and they should be forming good relationships with all the states, and including there should be a two-state solution in terms of Palestine and Israel. How do we get from Bambi Thug to that?
Because Israel's still dominating the Eurovision Song Contest.
That's right,
anyway, let's move on.
Okay, let's move on. By the way, are you going to watch it? You're not going to watch it on Saturday night?
I told you to. Jesus, that'd be about 3 hours. I'd never get back.
What about? But you'd be on to support Ireland.
Tall, couldn't give a monkey. No, Jude, I'll open a bottle of wine and read a book or something, or watch Match of the Day or something. But anything,
stick needles.
I'd rather, I'd rather
stick needles in your eyes.
Stick needles. Exactly, you got ahead of me. Exactly.
Okay, let's talk about Barry McCaffrey and Trevor Burney. Now, those two guys have had their name in the headlines from time to time because they did this wonderful documentary. Have you seen it? No Stone Unturned?
I did. It was superb.
My God, it was good. It really was good. It was about that. There's so many terrible things that happened. It was the Loughlin Island.
It was the Loughlin Island, 1994.
And wasn't it an old guy was killed?
He was he 94 or something? I can't remember. Or was he 80? He was sitting having a pint.
And he was a Protestant as well, I believe.
And he was sitting watching the match while he's smoking his pipe, and it was just one of those horrible things. But here's the point: McCaffrey and Bernie, they basically there were suspicions. As usual after an event. Wait a minute, how did these boys get in here? How come there was no patrols? How come and all the rest of it? And they start asking a lot of questions. It's like Pat Finucane. There were patrols 10 minutes before, and then suddenly the patrols disappeared, the British Army, and suddenly these boys go in and all the rest. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But they started saying about investigating collusion. between the PSNI. Was it the PSNI in 1994? Was it the RUC? Can't remember now. Probably the RUC. Was it?
Uh,
I can't remember. I'd been the RUC in
oh, it would be
1994, wasn't
because the PS.
it?
I
Yeah,
think so.
right.
Pretty
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I'm getting very confused now. But anyway, bottom line of it all, Jude, was they started investigating collusion between the Northern Ireland police, and I mean,
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
term they were used then, and the loyalists, and they started getting some very interesting information. They thought the police must have thought, wait a minute, they're getting inside information because obviously they were getting quite close, and so the cops started monitoring them totally illegally because they were quote troublemakers.
Mm.
Jude, who holds the police to account if the police can monitor those who are trying to hold them to account?
How dare they say, frankly, how dare they call people who are investigating possible misdeeds and crimes? How dare they call them, troublemakers? I mean, what are we saying? Are we saying you're a good citizen if you look the other way whenever the police
That's
are up to
exactly what
something?
they're
Maybe.
saying now.
I mean, that's the job.
Right,
That's why people become journalists. You hope and
right,
maintain that. I really feel sorry for them because it seems that they had secret database of journalists' phone records, which they
yeah,
kept updating every 6 months, so they knew who
yeah,
were they calling, and in that way they thought they would find out what the sources were that
yeah.
Bernie and McCaffrey were getting this information. Um, I don't. I mean, this happened. They were under real pressure. They were arrested. How long ago was that, Pat? How long ago
I
was
think
it?
about 2000. I think they were arrested around about 2018, 2019,
I
somewhere
see.
around there.
You need to have a lot of emotional strength to stand up under that kind of constant threat from these guys.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm
yeah,
sure Barry McCaffrey and Trevor Burney, I was going to say they didn't see the inside of a prison cell, but I'm sure they never
yeah,
occupied one. And that, for somebody who didn't, for that suddenly to find yourself in a cell on your computer
yeah.
seized, that would be pretty scary, really. Uh,
Uh,
Apart from the justice of the whole thing. But apparently, they said the report says that the PSNI were taking information, spying on journalists on an industrial scale. It
yeah,
wasn't just the one who check these guys out. They did it huge operations and kept on doing them. Apparently, there's this independent inquiry now, which is raising
yeah.
this thing, and the idea is to restore the confidence of people in the PSNI. I'll say now, I'm really sad to say this. I honestly don't think people are ever going to quite get back to trusting the PSNI. What do you
No,
think?
I think it's an investigatory powers tribunal. I think that's what it's called, Jude. But the,
Hmm.
the bottom line, they also, Jude, Vincent Kearney, who's now the editor of
Aye.
Northern Ireland editor for RT,
Yeah.
they also spied on him.
Yeah.
They also went after Niall Murphy, the solicitor,
Jesus.
did him as well. He's described it as chilling. And what he called the guy, I think, is Patrick Corrigan for Amnesty, says
Yes,
is
that's right.
explosive.
Yeah.
And Judy, the whole thing about this, basically, what they're saying is, you have to journalists, uh, we could be up to our eyeballs in the killing of Catholics and collusion with loyalists, but don't you dare investigate that. That's really what they were saying.
Yeah. Yeah. I see in the bottom of this report on the whole thing, there's a reference. Maybe it was Barry McCaffrey wrote this actually and said untold damage has already been caused by this shameful attack on press freedom will
Yeah,
only worsen if the policing board and Naomi Long, as the Minister for Justice, failed to act urgently. I couldn't agree more on both those. The policing board
yeah,
is supposed to check on the activities of the police. If ever there was a case for checking on the activities of the police, it's this. And if Naomi
yeah,
Long is the Minister for Justice, then this kind of blatant injustice that just keeps going on. I mean, she should be stepping in there and doing something about it.
yeah.
Um,
But even just to wait it for a minute, doesn't it tell you a lot about how corrupt? I keep going back to this thing because I remember so often getting involved in arguments and discussions and being totally frustrated when you sort of try to say to people back in the day, look, wait a minute, this sort of what would you say narrative that only the IRA is to blame for IRA. And by the way, let the IRA take that share of blame. I'm not saying that at all. But what I'm saying, Jude, the police were as corrupt as be damned, and there was collusion going on. They were feeding loyalist information. The British intelligence were up to their eyeballs. And when you consider that, I presume a lot of the stuff went on had to get political clearance at the very, very highest level.
Oh
So
yeah.
this idea that British politicians didn't know what was going on and all the rest, dude, they were spying on people who were what was going on. There was collusion, there was murder, and all the rest of it. But then the sort of propaganda that was peddled out to the people, particularly down south, was everything is to do with the IRA, and it's all that sort of stuff. It's all coming out sort of 50 years later and so on. But the damage has been done. This whole thing of the British state was an honest broker and all this bollocks.
We're coming up, Pat, I think, to the 50th anniversary of the Dublin Monaghan bombings.
Yeah.
Uh, why is it that the various Taoiseach and Taoiseachs have really, I don't remember any major figure in the South raising the topic of the Dublin Monaghan bombings. They should be. I cannot understand why they wouldn't. I mean, it's not even them up there they're concerned with. It's not a question, are they really Irish up there? We're talking about people who are members, citizens of the state in which the Dublin government exercises power, and yet nothing has been done. And those people have been looking for at least the truth about what happened, and they're just not getting it. And nobody seems to give a flying fuck, to be frank.
Yeah. 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 Well, when you think of all that's gone on, like the Dublin Monaghan bombings, a certain very well-known journalist from a unionist background told me years ago, Pat, and I'm talking years and years, he said, was not loyalists. He says, loyalists, he says, couldn't butter a ham sandwich. He says, back in the day, they were so useless. He says, look at how many things they got wrong. They blew themselves up and all the rest. He says, here was an operation where they went to Dublin, used two or three cars, had the bombs ready. By the way, I think it was bomb was got ready somewhere on the farm of one of the members of the Glenanne gang.
Yeah.
The police and Northern Ireland, the RUC cleared the way for them to get to Dublin. They had a dummy run. They planted a bomb in Monaghan to distract the Gardaí so the boys could get back across the border, etc. It was planned to perfection. And the Dublin government knew from early on, Jude, that the British intelligence were up their eyeballs and they were sending a message and so on. So, Jude, don't tell me that all our politicians back in the day, Charlie Haughey, Garrett Fitzgerald, Paddy Cooney, and all these guys didn't know what was going on. Yet all they come out with time after time was anti-IRA. Jude, I think back in the end, even though they knew the Brits were this, uh, I think they were more concerned with the IRAs, not taking over, getting the people of the South to sort of say, wait a minute, getting too emotionally involved in what
Yeah,
was going on
yeah,
Earth.
yeah, yeah. There was, I think it was Dermot Ferreter had a column today about it, and he described how Vincent Browne apparently was around at the time. Vincent Browne, the journalist,
News,
and he was there with his brother, and there was
yeah,
this woman lying on the pavement moaning, groaning. She was clearly still
yeah,
alive, but she'd been really badly wounded, and they went to pick her up. And he said the body just disintegrated
yeah.
uh, as he did. So it's that kind of
I heard him on RT yesterday. There's a series now on RT.
yeah.
He says he didn't know a human body could do it. She literally disintegrated in front of him.
Oh, dear God.
Horrible, that.
How would you, I mean, even just to see that happening, let alone have it happen
Uh,
to you, uh,
yeah,
it's terrible. The other thing, of course, is Drew Harris, who's a
yeah,
commissioner, Garda
yeah.
commissioner. Now, what was he in the police at that time? I wonder. Was he in the police or was he?
Well, Dada Jude was 1974. Just that's 50 years ago.
I need to
No,
check.
I couldn't have been Jude. No, I couldn't have been. No, I couldn't have been.
Too early. His father
But
would
I
have
but
been.
hold on. But he was the keeper of the secrets. So I
Hmm.
presume he was involved in the intelligence. So I presume he knows a lot of this stuff. But Jude, here, by the way, a woman that I know the last day, she gave me a copy. I had it years ago, Jude. The committee by
Oh,
Sean
yes.
McPhillamy.
I've
Yeah,
never read that,
Jude.
but
I read it years ago, and this woman gave it to me the last day, and I was sitting out in the car, and I must take it in. But that does a lot of investigating it. Now, McPhillamy's career as a journalist, I think, was nearly enough destroyed because he got sued right, left, and centre. But I don't
Mhm.
think the central tenet of his book was ever disproved. I think a lot of what he said was actually accurate.
Well, I think there were some very respectable people. I could be wrong about this, and if so, I apologize. But as far as I know, the former leader of the Ulster Unionist Party, David,
Well,
uh, he was mentioned in it, was he?
no, no, I think some people in the unionist community leaned on Trimble to sort of, and he wrote to the publishers of the book saying what they've done was
Oh,
disgraceful and all the
yeah,
rest of it,
yeah, yeah. Maybe that was his role.
and
Yeah.
that and so on. But Jude, I think at the time McPhillamy says sort of said, assuming Jude, I would like to know now, did anybody successfully? I can't remember. That's why I'm saying it. Did anybody successfully sue McPhillamy for what he said? But anyway, we're on dodgy legal ground because I can't
Aye,
remember.
true enough. But tell me this: what was the committee about? What exactly was it
Basically,
about?
about I remember Billy Wright and so on, and it was about really the actions of the Glenanne gang.
Really?
McPhillamy was the first guy that said, "Wait a minute, this is not some random. These guys are they're paid, are almost paid assassins." Billy Wright and Mark Fulton.
Yeah.
Fulton and they were shooting right, left, and centre. They were having easy targets. And Robin, by the way, Robin Jackson, the Jackal.
Aye.
Apparently, he was up to responsible for up to 100 deaths. That's
Oh.
one guy. You
Well, was
know,
that what the
uh,
committee was about then? Was that
that
talking
was
about
what
that?
the committee was about.
Well, I mean,
Yeah, that was about.
that ground covered by Anne Cadwallader in Lethal Ally.
I, but later, Jude, much later, he was McPhillamy was the first guy, and he
Aye.
was the first guy to say that. Wait a minute, this is not some sort of random. That the
Hmm.
British intelligence and the police are in here, and so on, and it's orchestrated and organised.
I well, would you agree with me, Pat? Am I being overly pessimistic that the PSNI have simply lost the faith of many people in the north? You think that's
Yeah, Jude, no, you see, there was supposed to be this thing, a new brush when the
yeah,
PS9,
yeah,
and they were supposed to be
and they look
starting from
different,
afresh.
and yeah, you see blue
Yeah,
lights
and
and you
all the
see
rest.
them. Yeah.
But I think there's a sort of, uh, old brush, still the same dirt, if you know what I mean.
You see, this is it. I am amazed because the PS and I were so aware of the need to be accepted by communities, including the nationalist community, that they worked very hard at it. We're very gentlemanly in any interactions I had with them. They were really good. But things seem to have changed. They've done things that, like the Bernie
But you know what I
traffic
think?
case that
I have to add one sort of caveat. A lot of this stuff is from 50 and 40 years ago, and
yeah.
I think they mightn't be responsible for it, but they're getting caught on the sort of slipstream of it all.
Yeah, well, yes and no. I mean, if you take we were talking about the PSNI. We're talking
Yeah,
about how the PSNI reacted to what Barry McCaffrey and
Jeffrey. Yeah,
Trevor
yeah, and
Burney did.
I'm accepting
And
that.
all of that is contemporary. Now, the thing
Yeah,
they're talking about may have occurred a long time ago, like 74 or something. But,
yeah,
these are the guys that are working journalists today, and
yeah,
they're doing things with them that are just simply not acceptable.
yeah.
Anyway, I who does the police see there must be a policing board that holds these guys to account
Yeah,
specifically there to do that. Well, they're doing a
yeah.
damn bad job is all I can say. If that kind of thing's going
Yeah, but
on.
everybody's. But you see, everybody's. It's like walking on broken glass. Everybody's scared to get cut themselves because if they go too far, it's all this sort of balance thing now they're
Yeah,
trying to do. If the Fenians say, "Well, you want an investigation," that then the unions ones, well, what about that? So I think they're sort of trying to sort of say, look, we know there's Jude. Everybody knows the history in the background that
yeah.
that it's corrupt and it was nasty and
Mm.
there's nobody coming out in the policing terms with smelling of roses.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Jude, maybe now it's like South Africa. Put it behind us.
Okay, okay, okay. Well, put it behind us for this talk. Anyway, Pat, let's go on to something rather more, I think, risible. Um, if I say the name Luis Rubiales, would that mean anything to you?
Yeah, he was what do you call it? He was the Spanish FA chief. That's what he was.
Yeah, he was the head honcho in the football in
Yeah.
Spain. And he, after the World Cup was won, I guess, by the women's team of
Spanish
Spain.
ladies.
Yeah,
Yeah.
women, ladies. I know the GA talks about the ladies.
Ladies
I think if you call them ladies, you'd have to refer to the gentlemen who play football.
Gentlemen GA. Yeah.
Anyway, he is now facing when the game was over, and the captain, I think it was Jenny Hermos, was being, given her medal or coming up to get the cup.
Uh,
he planted a kiss on her mouth. I saw that. I was watching it live.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
There's no doubt whether you're a real smacker, full on the lips. And she now says, that I was not consensual.
Yeah.
And her man could wind up in jail for 2.5 years. What do you think, Pat? Is this a good?
I think it's absolute bollocks from start to finish. But here's the thing, Jude. He had no right to do it. Absolutely none. And whatever. And so on. But if you watch it, Jude, this was not a sexual assault. Let's get this. It was totally inappropriate. He had no right to do it.
Pat, I don't think it. Wait a minute now. Wait a minute. You are the head of the president of football in Spain. The women's team have just won the World Cup.
I know. I was going to get that.
So they're coming along. Are you going to shake hands?
And you're so excited.
I think obviously
exactly.
Lean in, give her a kiss.
Judge, right, I seen it, and you could see he was so excited. He was absolutely over. The men's team have won the World Cup, and now our women have won the World Cup. I'm Spanish. I'm so proud, and he was over the moon, etc., and so on. But here's the thing: there's this sort of macho culture in Spain, and where the women and so on, and what he called you. I wrote it down. Say acebo, it's over. It's like the Me Too movement. An old thing in Spain, I think, and the whole thing about sexism and patriarchal society and all the rest of it, and so on. And I don't, by the way, I don't think it was done on full public view. The man had no sexual motivation whatsoever.
Absolutely.
But he invaded somebody else's space, and he did it without her consent. And I think that is the issue. Now, the fact that he's that is a trial, the man has had to resign. He's facing all sorts of public opprobrium and all the rest of it. And so I think that's more enough to charge somebody now and bring him to a high court for this year. And they're implying that it's sexual assault. It was done in front of probably 80,000 people in the stadium.
It could still be sexual assault
across the world.
It could still be sexual assault, even if he did it in front of about 1 million people.
I told you, Jesus Christ, dude, kissing somebody, right? He shouldn't have done it. I'm not defending that
actually,
not at all.
Yeah. I think what they should have. Well, here's what I would have done if I'd been in charge. I would have waited, and I would have said to him, or I would have had a meeting of the Spanish Soccer Federation or whatever, and I would have said, listen, guys, you can't do this kind of thing anymore. You may think it's just a little peck on the mouth, but that's not on. It's not the way the world does operate now. Women see themselves
maybe had he been a wee bit less arrogant, maybe he had turned around and said, look, I am so sorry. My apologies. I profoundly apologize. In the heat of the moment, I would like to apologize to Jenny Hernandez. I didn't mean it. We know embracing it out. I am, such and such. A wee bit of sort of what would you say, humility at the time might have worked on his advantage.
Pat, I think he was over the moon. I just think he was in
a
highly excited state, and I would have been in his shoes. I'd have felt the same way. And when you're like that, you see the way footballers go whenever they score the goal. Jeez, they pile on about 6 of them, top of them, and kissing each other.
Exactly, and then the next day they're going, "Oh shit, that was rather embarrassing." What do you call it? But this is the guy who's the chief executive of the Spanish. He was delighted, and you could see he was almost dancing. To end up in court for that is ridiculous.
Yeah, it is. I think at this stage, there should be a sort of rules drawn up that you don't do this kind of thing, or whether it's law or whether it's very clearly made clear to people like your man Luis Rubiales that this isn't the way it was maybe 20 years ago. That was okay, but not now. But I feel sorry for him. I really do. The old rules were bad. There should be new rules, but I just.
But Jude, I think he's got caught. I think he's got caught up in a far bigger issue. There's that. As long around then was the Me Too issue. It was all about the rights of people. This male female thing, and about power structures and all that sort of stuff, and about the sexism and Spanish. The old Spanish culture is very macho. The men sort of rule.
Yeah, true enough. But I still would feel I said I don't think that kissing the woman on the lips was a good idea. I don't know, would shaking her hand have really done it? I mean, would that not be a bit
Oh,
daft?
but I think the other thing did too, he tried to there's a bit of coercion. He tried to get somebody to tell her to say that it was
Oh, I
consensual and
heard
all the
that.
rest.
But you
Yeah,
see, if you thought you were under the gun like that, wouldn't you be? Wouldn't you want the
yeah,
girl to say, the woman to say, "Oh,
yeah.
for God's sake, don't bring it to the court or don't tell the
I know,
authorities."
but Jude, I think even most women would have said, "Look," he turned around and says, "Look, I apologize
Yeah.
profusely and profoundly. I
Mm,
didn't really mean it. I was so excited and all that, and I
mm.
didn't mean to offend or any
Aye, aye,
way at all.
aye.
That might have eased it." But this
Aye,
sort of arrogance, there's not. It was consensual and all the rest of it. I
aye,
think a lot of people said, "Man, when Jenny
aye.
Hermosa, I doubt if she wanted to be involved in the controversy, but she said, wait a minute, I didn't
Yeah.
ask for this,"
Yeah,
and
well, that's true. That's true.
yeah,
That's true.
yeah,
Okay. We've only got a minute left, Pat. Oh, God, we've less than a
yeah,
minute. And I was going to talk to you about ID cards. You
yeah.
know,
Well, we can
I
keep
see
that
where
to
Newton
Monday.
Emerson says ID cards would solve the whole problem. But there's a whole lot of people throughout the world, throughout Europe and throughout Britain who object to ID cards. Would you like to have an ID card?
Not particularly, Jude, but United Ireland, if we had a United Ireland, we wouldn't need ID cards. We wouldn't need it to common travel agent or area then.
Okay. On
Bye,
that
Jude.
note, I might say,
Note.
okay. Thanks, Pat.
Bye, Jude.
See
Bye.
ya.